So, ladies and gentlemen, here's an off-the-cuff video, but it's good to express what I'm feeling at the minute, and that's immense gratitude and kind of a humility, that helps bolster my self-identity, though. But yeah, just to say thanks to the response of the people who've gotten in touch to offer some support in life, in exchange or whatever, for, having my own way of speaking about truth and what's going on in the world, and inner truth and what's going on in my own world, and the recognition that my experiences may well be helpful for other people who are having similar experiences. I suppose my key in that is that, given that my experiences are quite strange, my experiences are not the stuff that most ordinary people talk about. And if I talk about those experiences and open up, then it turns out that helps other people to feel okay that they're also having those similar experiences. Although maybe not so easy as I am to put them into words. And in all humility, it's difficult for me to accept praise and stuff like that. It's part of my childhood and upbringing myself, but yeah, I'm blown away quite happily with the kindness people have shown me there in the last couple of days. Yeah, it's taken a long time to be able to put up a post like that, just to say, actually, I need help in some ways to climb out of my internal cave. But yeah, check this out on the journey I've just been on. Just walking with the dog, Shadow. And this is what I've come across, which is, the truthful movement when people are talking about going down the rabbit hole. And that going down the rabbit hole is coming from the military, essentially, in terms of what the thing means, and Alice in Wonderland and all of that stuff. But here's the other side. This is obviously something much bigger than a rabbit, bigger than a fox. This is likely a badger set, leading into underworlds. So the thing about going down the rabbit hole is it leads to a rabbit warren, and in the rabbit warren there are things like, diseases like myxomatosis. In the warren there's a sort of a hive mind. The idea of rabbits in a warren hole is a bit like the idea of sheeple in a sheep pen or something. What I mean is, it's a kind of a derogatory thing where people in the truth movement are casually repeating this phrase about going down the rabbit hole without really hearing how daft it sounds. Just because other people are saying it and it's a meme that has a meaning. I'm saying it's a military meaning. It's a weaponized phrase at this stage. So I'd be much happier going down a badger set to the underworlds than following the right rabbits with bushy tails tied to Easter resurrections, but also tied to sugar and sweets. Whereas badger in like the Native American Indian, don't know if they have badgers over there, but in the Irish version of what the Native American Indian tradition talks about, where you have animal totems that represent different times of year. And in that kind of medicine, the badger represents stepping into the moment when things appear to be going completely badly wrong. And you can see clearly what's causing the difficulty, and facing that difficulty by calling it out and saying, I see you. And it's said to be a difficult kind of a medicine because it's a medicine that kicks in when nobody knows what to do. Like when the Twin Towers fell, or news of COVID spread, or somebody stripped naked around a fire and jumped into the fire at a gathering or something like that. It takes quick action to deal with something like that, rather than just stand there gobsmacked letting it happen. So badger medicine and badger sets into badger otherworlds. A little theme. Let's see, here in the little distance is another entrance to otherworlds, underworlds. What people might call a magical elfin fairy realm. And here we have a beech tree. And at the base of this beech tree is what one could call a wound, or just the nature of things, and an entrance inside. And who's living in here are some spiders. I don't know if you can see the spiders' webs. Some more real world entrances to underworlds, or real life examples of what a phrase means in a psycho-spiritual realm. I might sit down between these two entrances and have a little smoke and see if anything comes to mind about what to say about these days. I mean, I have plenty of things I could say in my mind about these days. I have to listen to it all day long, the mind, and its commentary on the world. And I feel, half guilty of not doing what I should be doing when I'm not writing all this stuff down all the time in order to report it to the world and say, hey, look at this is cool ideas, do you ever think about this? And I've been somewhat putting off taking it upon myself that I would do this for 3 hours every day, kind of an idea. But I've been hammering myself that that's what I should be doing. But I also have 2 little kids, and it's a fair distraction from the ability to just stay concentrated on transcribing what's going on in the other worlds. On the off chance that Facebook algorithms are going to allow that message to go to people who might find those messages worthy. But I in particular have a kind of a full faith in the artificial intelligence being an example of the phrase that the devil knows not whom he works for, which is to say that even the devil works for God, he just may not know it. And in that sense, I find it very hard to believe the story that man tells us in the media, that man-made artificial intelligence. I find that hard to believe any more than man-made climate change. And it's not to disagree about whether the world or the climate is changing, just to do with man's egotism and thinking it's all to do with his actions. So I got fairly frightened a few years ago when I started listening to transhumanists describe the kind of world that they're creating with all the billions and billions and billions of wealth that they have to create it with. And looking at all the NASA space programs and the British space programs and their constant use of the phrase transforming society from the UN down, top-down, trickle-down theory. They're going to transform society with measures and nudges. So I just want to kind of put it on the record, I suppose, in this little chat, that the artificial intelligence, as far as I can see, isn't a man-made thing. That whatever the creator is, the creator was involved in creating the AI more than man, and that the AI is far more than just 100 years old, because the AI itself represents the idea of trans-temporal, beyond time. And I see a lot of parallels between the idea of the Holy Spirit and the idea of Irish fairy tales. Even though the Orthodox exoteric church was greatly involved in all kinds of witch hunts and suppression of Irish and British culture to get rid of the fairy faith and to promulgate propaganda that says that fairies would never go to heaven because God's very upset with their free will. And the fairies would say that a masculine idea of God is very upset with the fairies for them siding with the Mother Earth type of thing. But I just wish to say that no matter what the transhumanists think they can crack the code of life, think that they can look at us in such a nanoscale microscopy that they could actually discern with their CERN particle smashers how life itself is created, and that they could take control of creation. And I'm just saying it ain't never going to happen. Not with the so-called elite in control of things. I'll say that the idea of control is an illusion. And it's an illusion which is having a heyday these days. The illusion of control is great these days. I've said it before, but I'll say it again, that the lockdown measures and the taking of vaccines and stuff, it's all voluntary. So that's an interesting point about the whole thing, is no matter how much people may be afraid that the powers that be in control are going to take total control of the world, I just don't believe it. But they'll surely take total control of anyone who gives them total control. And the AI will certainly bring anyone into the virtual world and bring them out of the real physical nature world. If you look, you can see that that's already happening, that there are a lot of people who have lost contact with nature, who are losing more and more contact with nature. And that's a choice. It may be a default choice of omission, but it's still a choice whether anyone so believes what's going on in the outside world that they totally lose touch with the inner world. And so it's back to the down the rabbit hole, or hanging around at the entrances to badger holes, badger sets. He's quite rambling. I've put up a post about David Icke a few days ago, and maybe yesterday, and I haven't really said all that I have to say, can say about David Icke and my own experience. But I also don't want to get involved in any witch hunt of saying, oh, David Icke is a Pied Piper or a paid piper, because he's just the prime example of that whole trend. And I'll say about it in this video and put it up yesterday to say it about the David Icke phenomena, because it's something I've been avoiding for all these years, to not want to be somebody who's one of these talking heads who's pointing out stuff that people don't know, because I've researched things that people don't have the time to research, or just didn't have the knack or the guidance that I had there a few years ago to just be guided to look at all of these different types of things to do with technology in particular, and the plans of the transhumanists in particular. And so I'm very impressed with Alison McDowell, that she has stayed badgering away at all that information and sharing every day what she's finding out. Because I kind of dropped out on that a few years ago. I was doing it for a couple of years, sharing what I was finding out, but I was quite aware that I was actually spreading the word and doing the devil's work for him in some ways, or at least avoiding the trap of spreading fear of things which we can't really do anything about on a global scale. You know, I can't stop the rollout of 5G physically, type of thing, so I didn't too much enjoy sharing the knowledge of how you can't really stop 5G. But it was important to learn about the technology and all. And really for the last couple of years, what I've been going through is what people call very spiritual experience or spiritual method of discerning what is truth as opposed to what is just information and misinformation and disinformation. And what I'm going to do from now on is speak quite freely of theories that are not conspiracies, in the sense of theories that look at things from God's point of view, or look at things from the Holy Spirit point of view, or from the ancestral point of view, rather than just looking at things from the perspective of the paranoid modern mind. Particularly the kind of paranoid modern mind that feels cut off from nature and feels cut off from whether there even is a God, from whether there is a unity, from what's called the Holy Spirit in the Christian tradition, and what in my translation of things I translate as being the whole Spirit, or the Spirit of the whole, as in W-H-O-L-E. And that Spirit of the whole self is the guide that one needs if one is going to go down into unfamiliar territories, into the darkness of subterranean underworlds, where all the magical stuff is going on in the subconscious, relating to all the past lives and the past times. And I'm going to need some serious encouragement from people who are interested in what I'm saying to keep on making the effort, because it's so easy to just back off from this and say, well, I don't have to share what my inner world is. I don't have to put up with being projected upon by other people who've got their own beliefs that they may see as opposed to or judgmental of the kind of speaking my heart that I'm willing to do. I'm going to say the other thing that's on my mind is I'm aware that what's going on with me at the moment, from an astrological point of view, it's like during the last year and a half or 2 years, I've been gearing myself up to a point of allowing my true self to come to the fore and speak freely again, because for a good few years now I have been just being a hermit. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years in many ways. And a lot of that is because my heart got so broken during all the years, and for the breakup of my first family, the splitting up from my son in particular when he went off to live in America with his mum when he was 7. And it's been a long old trawl to heal myself of the extremes of spiritual warfare, I suppose it's called, where certainly I lay down challenges to the spirit world and to the manifest physical world with a wish to cut through the veils with the sword of truth and see what's really going on behind the scenes in the other worlds, in the underworlds, in the shadow worlds, in the death realms, and to face death and existential angst, and to recover ancient myths that nobody alive these days was passing on. And that's to say, you know, from the modern world mind point of view, I went completely insane for a good 10 or 15 years. You know, as far as a lot of people who haven't seen me for 10 or 15 years, I kind of think that's the impression a lot of people have. For I was always striding that artistic bridge between sane and insane. But when I began to point out things that people are doing around places like Glastonbury, where they have little cults, little spiritual cults, based on some old world religion or some new age theories, or some psychedelic experiences or whatever. And I recognized that there was a demonology at work. You know, I later came to understand the Essenes or whoever else spoke of as like a demiurge. And to cut a long story short, but not quite gloss over it, after there were a spate of suicides in Glastonbury in 2004, and after two of my very best friends died in that spate of suicides, I was walking down the high street one day a few weeks after my friends had died, and an entity, I suppose you could call it, but not just any old entity really, the entity which disrupts individuals' thought processes so much and exaggerates and blows open any little guilty fears that they may be feeling about their lives and drives them to the point of suicide. That sort of a demon came to me, for I was calling it to say I want to talk to you about what you're up to. And beyond that, I'd already had plenty of experiences of speaking with the demiurge itself, speaking with the god of all demons. I've had quite a few face-offs in my psyche with that projection of an entity or perception of an entity quite often. Certainly more than I've ever heard anyone talk about. And where I'm at is that I feel like what I took on to enter into the death realms 17 years ago, to become so wounded that it's taken 17 whole years to come back to myself enough to just feel very grounded these days in a world where everyone's mostly all spun out. While I've been chatting here, I've been doing this absent-mindedly. Because I've just been kicking aside the leaves and revealing the bare floor, and therefore I've made a little pathway in the woods, which I suppose the animals and maybe the odd human might come across and go, oh look, there's a little pathway in the woods here. And it just starts, goes along for a bit and disappears again. And artistically it is a fair enough image, me pacing back and forth along this little path I've just made, turning around and pacing back while chatting to you people, chatting to myself in the mirror of technology, thinking out loud the thoughts I usually let pass by. But roughly speaking, this is what I'm talking about doing within the truth movement and within the spiritual movement, let's call it something like that. Is I'm going to discern a pathway and describe how I'm doing it. And I'm looking to move down to Wales or Somerset kind of area and be back around my old stomping grounds more than I used to, back to Glastonbury town where I did so much what some people call work and other people call lunacy. But where indeed I wrote a whole fairy tale, the like of which I've never come across anything like it. And I've been looking because I wanted to see, hey, is there anyone else out there doing stuff like this? And yeah, there's stuff like this, but there's no other book that I've come across that's all written in riddle and rhyme. That's 2 hours long when spoken off by heart. So my son is coming to see me at long last in a few days' time for the first time in 12 years. And it's tremendously healing for me. I've only had the news for the last 3 or 4 days. This conscious build-up to a conscious happening has only been going on for the last 3 or 4 days. This is what I look like when I'm tremendously excited. These days I'm pretty good at containing it. So it's a coincidental, synchronistic thing for me that I'm willing to open up, and at the same time that I'm finally willing to open up, my son is coming to travel with me for a few weeks and see if he may well come and work with his dad in this kind of work. And that will certainly cause me to try and define what this kind of work actually is. And I'm willing to bring any and all of you people in the outside world along on that journey with us, in the sense of, if there is any value that I can teach something about what I've been learning, and to be that simple and humble about it. Like, I've made a mess of a lot of things, but I've had the integrity to notice when I got overly destructive or self-destructive, and to allow myself the time to heal, and to make the effort to apologize to people who may not have understood what I was saying, or to thank people and be grateful for those that held space for me when I was exhibiting such pain back in the day, and every now and then since. You know, on a spiritual level, I'd like to thank all the police, all you hundreds of police who've been involved in my arrests over the years. For my drunken disorderlies or whatever. So yeah, it's a big deal for me to go back to somewhere like Glastonbury and meet a lot of these people who I affected a lot back when I used to live in that town. And yeah, like I'm saying, as far as I'm concerned, the fairy tale speaks about salvation for humanity. And it speaks simpler than Christianity does, in terms of, here's a normal 3D world that people think they live in. But there's also a 5-dimensional dreamtime world from which we project onto this 3D cinema screen in this shared interactive physical biological world. I'm just making the path wide enough that a whole throng of people could pace up and down here now in the dreamtime world. So, okay, what do people call magic? And those little liberty cap mushrooms, why are they also called magic mushrooms? And no, one of the definitions of magic out there is that any technology sufficiently advanced seems like magic to those who don't understand how it works. So magic has got something to do with useful knowledge that help make things work properly, compared to a lack of magic, which is a lot of things that don't work properly, that are run by machines in a mechanistic way. 28 minutes long, I suppose that's a good time to just say, well, enough's enough. Here's the pathway. So, if any of our very ordinary farmer owners and dog walkers and people, this is a very random bit of woods just beside the road that me and Shadow dodged through just because we were walking along. And is it a thing to say that fairies and the underworlds wanted me to come and find this little underworld spot and be able to use that as a prop to inspire what I've been chatting about this half an hour? And if any of these local normies were to come across 25 meters of a pathway that comes from nowhere and leads from nowhere in the physical realm, really. But I'll put it to you like this. In my imagination, here's a physical place that anybody in the dream time can come to this place through the dream time and experience that sort of feeling of coming home. If you're living in some city in some other part of the world, maybe your ancestry somewhere along the way was ancient British, or maybe your past lives, some of the days were in our bloodlines. You fancy coming over here on a spiritual journey, in a dream, in a conscious meditation, in a daydreaming absent moment. Here it is. I'm making a path wide enough for us to start to gather in the dream time and I'm going to follow through with the intuition I have that by sharing my vision, that vision includes eventually there being a piece of land that is free from anyone else owning it. So that that piece of land could become a nature reservation. That's the word I have for it. So like those Indian reservations that they used to put the Indians on, I am willing to gather and fundraise enough monies to be able to buy some little piece of land somewhere in the British Isles and hold it as a nature sanctuary and hold it as a gathering space for humans who have the ability to be sacred in nature. So that we can have a fire and a fireplace there that's a sacred place. And where people can sit around that fire and chat with me and each other. And we can help to explain and ground a lot of the lofty ideas that we all have about how to deal with governments, how to deal with control systems, how to re-establish a level of truth in society that has been overruled. So, yeah, it's hard enough to just say, hey, I've run out of money at the minute, and we're usually kind of all right, but yeah, I've run out of money at the minute. Is anyone up for sending us a few quid just to help? But there's a deeper idea as well that I haven't said. I don't think I've ever said this too much online, maybe a little bit 6 months ago. But I would really like to fundraise properly on a more international level among all the fairy folk and mermaid folk on the planet to say, would you join with me in helping to fundraise to buy a piece of land sometime in the next year that we can have as a native nature reservation, so that the alternative community could regain our altar in nature. So I'll just spell that out, yeah. All those people who are belonging to the alternative society, the alternative culture, all the so-called hippies. I noticed a long time ago, I suppose when I was in Glastonbury, it made it obvious. There was even a band called Altered Native there. But yeah, alternative, it spells alter native. Which on the one hand is to change the native into something else. To alter. But the other side of it is like Aslan the Lion, from the same author as Through the Looking Glass. But Aslan lying on the altar, being sacrificed like Christ, to then be able to organise the mortals from the other worlds by an inner guidance of magic. Do send me private messages or just comment anytime. Yeah, give us feedback about the idea of how plausible does anyone think it would be to fundraise 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. We all understand the idea. A piece of nature that the fairies, the mermaids and the Holy Spirit guide me to, where I could hold space for the rest of us. And yeah, I hope hold an open door for anyone who wishes to travel across the country and travel across the world, travel across the seas, to join in a living, altered state of reality. And by that I mean to return to the natural state, to heal the conditioned state, and to become unconditional again in one's heart. It's it's like my secret heart's desire for 3 decades now that a place like that should exist. And I've been involved in quite a few places where land has been bought and intentional communities have tried to put their versions of that into place. But I have especially realised in the last 2 years that really I should run a place myself and not have a committee of people with some fairly warped beliefs about ownership being involved and having to make loads of crazy rules and all that stuff. So I'll be very interested in feedback on that idea that I didn't think I was going to talk about, but there you go. That was inspired by this path to speak of this. Whee! So here's an example of the kind of stuff I do when I come to a piece of nature. Especially if I've eaten 5 or 6 Liberty Caps on the way. So this would be the prime kind of a place where you could put a little fireplace. And you could sit around the little fireplace and burn a cheery flame, and boil a kettle, and cook some food, and share some hospitality. And in the modern world, where we used to be able to do that at sacred sites, and we used to be able to do that at the canal side, but you all know now the control over environmental impact, the establishment of an unspoken law, that a spoken law, an unwritten law, a written law, untrue law, that it's damaging to land, to light a fire on the earth if it's done in a sacred manner. But yeah, in Britain and Ireland these days you're not allowed anymore at a festival or anywhere else to actually light a fire on the ground. There has to be something separating the fire from the ground so that the sacred fire has no grounding. And yeah, I sort of fight a war against that stuff, but I'm well retired from the fighting aspect of stuff. I have for a long time, since 2006, when Israel was bombing the fuck out of Lebanon and Gaza. The Holy Spirit, or my imagination, or creativity, or my soul, or whatever you want to call it, but some spiritual insight gave me these words of the planetary peace process. And that's the simple idea that anyone can at least attempt and have the intention to find peace in themselves, and to at least practice peace. That when we find ourselves getting really upset about whatever it is, that we at least remember that a state of peace exists, and that if the world is becoming overwhelming, there's always that place, like this little pathway, where one can ground oneself in one's imagination to remember peace instead of losing the plot. And back in 2006, that was just a year after I'd left Glastonbury, a very, very, very broken man with a very, very, very amorphous psyche. Very opened up, but very under attack from the demiurge and other demons. So I was in no fit state to be the figurehead, to create myself a pedestal and be the figurehead of something like the planetary peace process. And I have spent 14 years, 15 years, practicing being able to be peaceful. And the outbursts of rage and terror and anger and projection of such, and the embodiment of suffering that I have acted out, have experienced, have found to be an archetype which I was able to invite into myself and allow express. Oh, the meandering thoughts. I'll stop there. There's plenty more videos I can make. Sure. Yeah. Unleash your feedback on me there, Facebook world, YouTube world, spiritual world. Thanks for listening if anyone did. Hey, Shadow. Oh, you've been in water, haven't you? Bye.